Order! There will be order! Mr. Fiddler, you understand that despite your brother's cowardly actions, you will be tried for your crimes.
Yes, I do.
And the prosecution proceeds. Tell us once more what had happened.
My brother was the village shaman. He was tasked with healing and counsel. Sometimes other things.
You are accused of murdering your own daughter, and who knows how many others based on these unreliable claims. It seems healing was not your brother's forte.
It needed to be done. When my people grow sick, sometimes they are taken.
Order! Mr. Fiddler, it is not up to you who lives or dies, not even in your lawless lands. And by whom exactly were they taken, as you say?
Wendigo.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Insomnia. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and let's get right into it. In the year 1907, in what is now northwestern Ontario, Canada, two OG Cree brothers, Jack and Joseph Fiddler, were arrested by the Northwest Mounted Police and moved to Norway House, Manitoba, to await their trial. Jack was the spiritual leader and chief of his tribe and was said to have the unique ability to heal others and, more interestingly, fight evil. Though he had chose to end his own life at 87 years old, Joseph was still convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Their crime was the murder of Joseph's daughter, along with 14 others, each from different walks of life, yet all possessing one distinct commonality. They had become, or were becoming, Wendigo. In the boreal forests of Canada and the Great Lakes region of the United States, the winter season is notoriously severe, but for many of the indigenous populations, it brings something far more sinister. The Algonquian people told of an evil spirit which dwells in the hinterlands of their settlements, waiting for those who would foolishly wander into the derelict Hyperborean wilderness that is its domain. They call it Wendigo, or the Ice Cannibal, and though it goes by many names and variations and pronunciations, the story is always the same. One who commits a terrible act, such as withholding food from their starving tribe during famine, or even consuming human flesh, can turn a man into one. Some say it is the spirit itself which possesses an individual and drives them to such things. Others say that through these taboos, the spirit or creature itself is born. Regardless, once a person has changed, they're doomed to wander the bleak forest and feed upon their fellow man with a ravenous and insatiable appetite. For the name Wendigo roughly translates to the evil spirit that devours mankind. Many omens were said to forebode the approach of the Wendigo. The skies grow dark, the wind rises and snuffs fires out, the smell of death and decay permeate the air, and from the frozen woods there cries out a primeval shriek. The creature itself is described differently throughout various myths and legends, and some even say it has no physical form, rather it is purely an elemental force which possesses man, though generally speaking there are two physical depictions which are most often reoccurring. One depiction is of a pale and emaciated ghoul-like figure, hollow, sunken eyes, skin as gray as ash or discolored like a corpse, wrapped around bones protruding from every articulation of the creature's frail and vile frame. The other depiction is often that of a giant beast which lumbers throughout the forest, vaguely resembling its wildlife, but in a most abhorrent manner. The creature is larger than any man or beast, sometimes exceeding heights of 15 to 20 feet in stature, covered in dark matted fur with formidable claws and bearing a horrific mockery of a stag's head on its broad and powerful shoulders. Both versions of the creature are oftentimes said to have disgustingly distended stomachs, nearly bursting or having been with human remains, an ever-present symbol of their unending hunger. Another common feature is that the creatures are permanently covered in a layer of frost or ice, or sometimes are entirely composed of it. Indeed, the only way to kill the Wendigo is to dismember it limb from limb, then burn its heart. Other tribes of indigenous people have their own version of this creature in some way or another, but the concept usually remains in the same vein. For example, in Iroquois lore, they spoke of stone coats, or large icy stone giants which fed upon the flesh of men. There was also the Chenoo of Micmac lore, which are similar in description, and it should be noted that the Micmacs were heavily present in mythology, albeit a bit fictionalized, in the famous Stephen King novel Pet Sematary. While many people may have a vague concept in mind of what the Wendigo is, the spirit was mostly brought to public attention through the novella The Wendigo by famed English horror writer Algernon Blackwood in 1910. However, this depiction is more of an amalgamation of several other supernatural concepts. Namely, this story seems to reference more what is known in the mythology of the Beaver people as wechuge, when a person becomes possessed by the primeval forest spirits and becomes like an animal. The primary distinction here is that the Wendigo is often described as a madness, whereas wechuge is transcending all notions of humanity and becoming like a deity. The Wendigo's horrific appetite and its inability to satiate it is a symbol that has appeared before in the mythology of other cultures around the world. An example would be the hungry ghosts of East Asian lore, spirits which are doomed to wander forever and for a number of reasons are unable to fill their gluttonous appetites, such as their throats being too thin to actually swallow or their mouths being too small to even fit food into them. In some versions, the food they try to consume even bursts into flames or turns to ash. Whenever a story becomes documented as myth or legend in the annals of our history, there are those who always posit that perhaps beneath the hyperbole, there remains some relic of truth. And with the case of the Wendigo, we have a strange phenomena which is only added to the mythos, and has warranted a deeper look into these stories in what is only known as Wendigo psychosis. The term is ascribed to a culture-bound illness which drives men to crave human flesh or even act upon it and attempt to consume those around them. A culture-bound illness or a culture-bound syndrome is exactly that, a series of mental or physical ailments which affect those of only a certain culture. It sounds too strange to exist, but very much so does, albeit not entirely understood. You may have heard the phrase running amok at some point to denote the act of causing trouble. Well, believe it or not, this actually comes from the culture-bound syndrome running amok in Malaysian and Indonesian societies, where someone will literally have outbursts of violent and riotous behavior with seemingly no discernible cause. Another interesting example are known as ataques de locura, or madness attacks, where Latinos and Hispanics in the United States will have bouts of schizophrenia-like symptoms from, again, seemingly nowhere. Oftentimes these are attributed to supernatural elements, such as curses or black magic.
The first documented case of Wendigo psychosis comes to us from the year 1661 as chronicled by the Jesuit missions through New France. What caused us greater concern was the intelligence that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputed by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous where they were to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not very unusual among the people we were seeking. They are afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh, they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men like veritable werewolves and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey. And the more greedily, the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and as death is the sole remedy among those simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. The next and arguably the most infamous case comes to us from 1878 in Alberta, Canada. A Plains Cree man by the name of Swift Runner was holed up in the middle of winter with his family. Slowly but surely they began to starve, but not before Swift Runner would kill each and every one of them one dark and frozen night. He then proceeded to butcher and devour his wife and 6 children, despite only being 25 miles away from the supplies which could have fed him and his family. He eventually turned himself in to the authorities, where he was promptly executed for his crimes.
This brings us full circle to the story we first mentioned at the beginning with the brothers Jack and Joseph Fiddler, and the last officially documented case of Wendigo-related activity. As more and more indigenous peoples became less rural, the instances of encounters with the spirit or the psychosis associated therewith had dramatically declined, though many say that the spirit still wanders the frigid north to this day, lurking just beyond the dwellings of modern man, awaiting those foolish enough to enter its territory. Whether or not these stories have any truth to them is up for debate, but there is one thing that I would like to know, and that's what you guys think. Comment below. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and this is Insomnia.